Welcome back, family and friends, gamers, and cat lovers. After the release of the last developer's diary, we now know there will be no more free updates or any more expansions to Monster Hunter World. We also know that Monster Hunter Rise is right around the corner for the Nintendo Switch. And in my most controversial video to date, I expressed my frustrations with the series. One of the points being the story. When I'm sitting around with my friends hunting or playing Monster Hunter, we bounce ideas back and forth. So in this video, I'm going to approach it as if I had a seat at the developer's table. And if I could make changes or make new improvements to Monster Hunter, how would I do it? Well, it's quite a lot. But before I get into it, I think it's important to point out that I absolutely admire risk-taking. After all, I am a motorcycle rider, but some of my favorite game series that have kept me interested are titles that try something risky, something different. For example, I love the evolution of the Metroid series, how it went from side-scrolling platformer to first-person shooter in Metroid Prime, to third-person shooter in Other M. Whenever the next Metroid comes out, I hope they try something new again. I also love game series where characters and environments grow and change. An example of that would be the Mortal Kombat series. In the last installment of the series, we find that a lot of the original characters are pushed into their 40s and 50s in age. I feel like the characters in the game have grown, as I have. Truly one of my favorite storylines of video games that I like to follow. So when you compare what they've done with games like Metroid and Mortal Kombat, you see that Monster Hunter hasn't really changed. No risk taken and no development of any characters. It's fundamentally been the same game with just quality of life changes. Now, I'm not going to suggest that Monster Hunter become a first-person game, but I definitely think some work can be done with the story to show growth and development or a changing environment. I'm also going to take a stab at shaking up some of the fundamentals of the game as well. Again, I'm just pretending to have a seat at the developer's table here. And as some of my subscribers know, I love talking about Monster Hunter. So let's all take a seat at the developer's table and share our thoughts on how we would change our favorite game. And I'm going to start this with a brief history lesson about my experience with Monster Hunter. I've been playing the series ever since the game was introduced in 2004 on the PlayStation 2. However, I didn't play it online then, offline only. And I would play this game for hours on end to the crack of dawn and beyond. I still do actually. Anyway, my first character was Levi Windblade. I wanted this Star Wars-ish sounding name, like Luke Skywalker, Biggs Darklighter, and now Levi Windblade, the Monster Hunter. And I loved that kazoo helmet. And if I remember right, before I even understood how the armor system worked, Levi's armor was a mix of kazoo, monoblos, gravios, and RATHALOS parts, and I primarily used the greatsword before there was a chunky true charge. Anyway, from there, Capcom released Monster Hunter Freedom, Freedom 2, and Freedom Unite for the PSP. And for those series of games, my hunter was Jesus. Yes, that Jesus. And he wielded the mighty greatsword, the Epitaph. And his guild card quote was Austin 316. What does Austin 316 say?
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass.
That's what the writing on the epitaph translates to. Anyway, then came Monster Hunter Tri for the Nintendo Wii. This is where Vasquez would make her debut in Moga Village as a hunter. This Vasquez, the one from Aliens.
Let's rock!
That was her guild card quote in Monster Hunter Tri. Vasquez would eventually go on to be my hunter in every Monster Hunter after that, eventually earning the nickname Squiggle from the guild marm in Monster Hunter Generations. Anyway, I am really getting sidetracked here. It wasn't until Monster Hunter Tri that I would finally experience Monster Hunter Online. And it is this experience that helped shape my opinion on the first topic I'm going to tackle. Layered armor, and why I do not think it is good for the series, and if they're going to keep using layered armor, then I propose this change going forward. But before I state what this is, let me be clear. I enjoy the current armor building system in Monster Hunter World and the way it's been throughout the series, where we collect pieces of armor to give ourselves skills. I cannot stress enough how much I like this. I spend hours building new armor sets just to try things out. It's what I'm most familiar with, and I am an experienced mixed armor set builder. And as you can see, I have spent thousands of hours playing this game. Again, my issue is with layered armor. But that's a little misleading, as I like layered armor just as much as the next hunter. I even made a video about it. Check it out if you got the time. Anyway, I like to use it like everyone else, to hide ugly mixed sets, or I like to use the direwolf set to make it look like I'm prepared to hunt in the frozen hoarfrost reach, or use a layered Gyros armor so I can make it look like I have a mask to breathe in the rotten veil, or to make Squiggle look like the rock star she is. So what's my point, right? Stop being confusing. Do I like them or do I hate them? Stick with me. I got a story to share. When I played Monster Hunter Tri, I made it a goal of mine to complete the offline story mode first before I ventured into the online world. It made sense to me. I had a responsibility to protect my village first before I could venture into the online world. The offline mode's final hunt was Acadius. A hunt, though not likely, I hope returns to the series someday. Anyway, after saving Moga Village from the Cadius, I was ready to venture to the big city and join other hunters from around the world. And throughout the first few weeks, I had noticed not many other hunters had the Cadius armor. And that's when I realized this had become an indicator of a hunter's skill. If I saw another hunter with the Cadius armor or weapons, I knew that this hunter had not been carried and was competent enough to complete the game's offline mode, which means by just looking at their armor, I could tell they most likely soloed every other hunt in the game. This would give me a little more confidence going into the hunt with this hunter that also donned the Cadius armor. However, the Cadius armor wasn't the only armor that gave away visual cues. Any armor gave you some kind of hint. Maybe not so much about their skill level, but whether or not they were prepared for the hunt we were about to embark on. This was important because it opened dialogue between hunters. For example, say you were getting ready to hunt a RATHALOS, and you noticed one of your fellow hunters was bringing a sword infused with the fire element. This would give you the opportunity to touch bases with them and say, hey, the weapon you're bringing may not be as effective on this hunt. Do you have anything with thunder or dragon element? And at that point, they may thank you by saying, good call, I forgot to switch it since we just hunted a Barioth. This works for armor as well. The more you play and the more time you spend at the armory, building and buying armor, the more familiar you would become with armor's elemental weaknesses and strengths. For example, you will learn that the RATHALOS and Rathian armors are weak to dragon and thunder, but strong against fire. Or that the Diablos armor is weak to ice and the Barioth armor is weak to fire. So for the same hunt with the RATHALOS that we were about to go on, you might notice that their fire defense is a little on the low side because they are wearing the Barioth armor set. And since you caught this visual cue, this again gives you the opportunity to check with them to see if they are comfortable in the armor that they are wearing. This dialogue is a good thing, and it helps us all improve. Layered armor removes this opportunity to pick up on these visual cues, and I have an embarrassing example of this. When the ALATREON event was unlocked, there were two quests, the Evening Star and the Dawn of the Death Star. In the Evening Star, the ALATREON starts off weakest to ice. In Dawn of the Death Star, it starts off weakest to fire. At the time, I had only built a set to maximize for ice damage and did not have a set for fire. So several times I accidentally readied up for the quest Dawn of the Death Star, where it starts off weakest to fire while the ice element has zero effect on it. Now, of course, you can open up the options to inspect your teammates' armor and skills, but on each of these hunts where I accidentally signed up, my teammates all missed the visual cue because I had layered my armor and weapons, and none of them opened up the menu to check if we were all properly equipped to handle the hunt. And because I was improperly equipped, we failed. Ultimately, it is my responsibility to be properly equipped to handle each hunt. But this is a team-oriented game, and we should all be looking out for each other. So, can you see my issue with layered armor now? We like it because it gives us the opportunity to make our hunters look the way we want, but it also strips away the visual cues we used to pick up on to engage with our fellow hunters. And maybe your experience is different from mine, but this has been one of the most socially empty Monster Hunters I have ever played. Possibly because I do tend to play in multi-language hubs, and the best way to communicate is through stickers. And for some reason, everyone loved the Kabuki dance. But anyway, my feeling about layered armor is it is more of a bane than a boon. Being able to pick up on visual cues also feels far more authentic and important to the game, while layered armor feels quite the opposite of authentic. Fake. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I think some of us, and myself included, had a lot of pride in building these ugly mix sets or fashion sets with amazing skills. This was another cue seasoned hunters could take note of. An experienced armor builder would be able to tell what skills you were bringing to the hunt just by looking at your armor set. Yet another point on why visual cues are important, although I am certain layered armor is here to stay. So, how do I propose getting around this problem? Well, we're finally going to get into the meat and potatoes of how I'd overhaul Monster Hunter. The ribeye of my idea is this. You ready for it? Of course you are. The ribeye is an excellent cut and delicious. Medium rare guy myself. Anyway, so I'm going to be bold like A1 here and suggest no more armor skills and instead introduce race class skills. And before I begin pouring the A1 all over this, I would like to state that if a steak is cooked right, it doesn't need any sauce. Meaning, I think Monster Hunter as it currently is a well-cooked steak. I like the current armor skill system the way it is. I just don't like the way layered armor is implemented. Again, I'm just having a fun thought experiment here, as if I had a seat at the developer's table with Capcom. But you're going to have to get your own steak though. Sorry. Where was I? No more armor skills and instead race class skills. The classes are already all in the game. There will be a human class, a palico class, and a Wyverian class. Let's take a closer look at what each class could do and what are their perks and characteristics. The palico class would be best suited using weapons like the gun lance, light bowgun, charge blade, and hunting horn. The skill bonuses would include things like artillery secret and bombardier secret, because we know they love blowing things up, and the sonar skill, because we know they love to toot. They would have lower HP, but higher evasion skills. The human class, naturally the strongest of the three classes, have higher attack values and more HP. They find themselves most comfortable with weapons like the hammer, greatsword, lance, sword and shield, and heavy bowgun, with skill bonuses like slugger secret, guard up, heroics, and resentment. And finally, the Wyverian class, mystic and spiritual, excels at dancing around with dual blades, long swords, insect glaives, bows, and switch axes. They have lower attack values and HP than humans, but more than palicos, and are excellent at finding weak spots and have skills like tenderizer, maximum might, and critical eye. They also have a special connection with the elements and can unlock weapons' true elemental potential without any charms. So that loosely covers each race and what they would specialize in. So how would we add more skills? Well, I would not retain the current decoration system and instead focus more on training to improve skills. Think a robust training session like Gran Turismo. Say for example, you want to improve your evade skill. You hit the training ground and practice dodging. Maybe there's palicos there and they're hurling things at you, and you have to consecutively dodge them successfully a certain amount of times or something to complete this training, and your evade skills improve. Try to think of the training session as a mini game in a game, right? Want to deal devastating blows on your first swing of your mighty greatsword and raise your crit draw ability? You gotta hit the training ground like guts.
195, 196, 197, 198, 199! 200!
I understand that RNG is what keeps people coming back to the game, but I've always liked the training hunts they had in earlier Monster Hunters to help you learn new weapons. And I think the training to earn skills would be an excellent way to develop your character and get familiar with skills in the game. And as you rank up, you get more slots to add to your class, giving you the opportunity to hit the training ground to improve existing skills or add new ones. So you could have a human or Wyverian that plays the hunting horn, but they would have to train to acquire the sonorous skill, as opposed to our Palico friends who would be natural hunting horn virtuosos and already have the skill. So you have to make an important decision on whether or not you want to spend slots on a skill that isn't natural to your class. And if I may add, I made 2 videos on how I improved the hunting horn. Check them out if you have the time. Anyway, or you could have a Palico or Wyverian greatsword user. And of course the Wyverians would have the natural ability to tap into the elements, but they would still lack the raw physical power of a human. So it might change your playstyle on how you would use the greatsword. For example, since humans are naturally stronger, they will opt for the bigger, devastating blows like the chunky true charge. I love the sound of that, and I can't take credit for it. That came from one of our viewers, the Cringe Prophet. And you got to give me a new photo to use, or I'm going to use this every time I refer to you. Cringe to Damas. Or what about this one? What do you think about this one? Anyway, humans, bigger, badder strikes, while Palico and Wyverians may get better skills using quicker splashes. So they might hit the training ground for different skills if they're going to use a greatsword. Or you could have a human or Palico using dual blades, but because they lack the spiritual connection with the world like Wyverians, they can't draw out the weapon's true elemental potential, and they also may train at the training grounds for different skills when they use the dual blades. Can you see what I'm leading to here? I'd like to see the return of strong visual cues to the game. Of course, we could just remove the layered armor option, but again, I'm just trying to have fun here, right? I mean, if I could change it, how would I, right? So keeping layered armor, but bringing back visual cues. And this is how I would do it. If you see a human with a greatsword, you know they will be coming to deliver skull-cracking blows. While if you see a Wyverian with a greatsword, you know they will be relying on their elements and quicker, shorter strikes to be more effective. Or maybe you see a human with a hunting horn. Chances are they may be focusing more on KOing the monster than playing sweet melodies like our feline companions. By making race skills instead of armor skills and a training ground where you can enhance and improve your skills, all armor you get would be just for aesthetics, just to look cool. Now, I'm not saying in this particular version in my mind that you'd have to play, if you're a human, you have to play the human way. You can develop your character and skills however you want. All of the point I'm making is that if you basically have a place where you can develop skills and you don't need armor skills, armors just can be for looks, right? However, weapons, I don't know. I would not have the option to layer those. I just don't like the idea of having the option to layer a fire weapon as an ice weapon, etc. Maybe there would be a little bit of flex where maybe you can layer a fire weapon with another fire weapon and ice weapons and so on. I don't know. I just can't find a way around that. If you have a good idea, I'd love to hear it. But aside from that, I do believe, as I mentioned, race class skills instead of armor skills will allow us to make our hunters look how we want, but still have the visual cues in place so we can have an idea of what to expect from our teammates. But if I do away with armor, what about defense values? Well, I'd have the overall defense increase as you rank up, but I'd get rid of elemental defense values and instead focus more on the blights or effects monsters create. Much like how when you get stuck in a Frostfang Barrios Ice Breath attack, or a Barras Mudslap drop-off, or being a Human Torch if you're caught by a Rathian Fireball. I would just make some monsters have stronger blight effects than others. I mean, they really already do this. I would just make defense even across the board, and that way you don't have to worry about elemental builds. I mean, maybe I'd keep the mantles, where the mantles can prevent against the blights. I don't know, I did like the introduction of mantles, although sometimes I'm terrible at remembering to use them. And another example I can think of that I really liked was the Dread Queen Rathian. If she caught you with that tail, you had seconds before you died to that poison. And since I'm talking about status damage, I would just combine Thunder and Paralyze instead of Thunder Blight, making it easier for you to become stunned. I just make it just like how Paralyzed works now. The more Thunderblight you take on, the easier it is to become paralyzed. Then they could bring back the kazoo and make it the ultimate paralyzed monster. Anyway, to summarize all of that, do away with armor skills and replace and introduce race class with skills, and then we could layer to our heart's content. Now, before I move on to the potato part of this video, I have a few more bites of steak to finish. Delicious. Now, I would also include a new job class. I would make a handler / gathering / shopkeeper class. What is this 3-in-1 class thing? Well, let me share a few thoughts before I break this down. There's a special place in my heart for the early days of Monster Hunter. There was no farming, and gathering was a big part of the game. Back then, before you took on a series of big hunts, you would normally have to prepare, which usually meant you'd have to do several gathering runs, and even more if you were a gunner for all that ammo. So you'd run out and gather stacks of herbs and blue mushrooms and honey for your potions, and hunt aptonos and apsroses for meat to keep nourished over your next few hunts. But I mean, now I don't even touch them. I just run past them. They're just in the background. I mean, and since the release of World, or probably even before that actually, I don't even touch the barbecue spit anymore. And I sure as hell don't gather. Sometimes I wonder why they even keep it in the game. Anyway, the initial thing that had drawn me to Monster Hunter was how it tapped into what ancient man used to do, what's in our DNA, to hunt and to gather. I understand that Capcom has improved the game to live up to its title, Monster Hunter. But Monster Hunter World feels more like the arcade version of what they initially released in 2004. But back to this gathering thing. Not only did you need to gather to prepare for hunts, but they also had missions where you needed to deliver rare ores or Wyverian eggs. The first time I ever embarked on one of these quests, a RATHALOS was chasing me through each area. It was terrifying. Now I understand that these were some of the more unpopular missions in Monster Hunter, but here's my reason why I want these to return and why I want a job class specifically for it. Starting with the handler aspect of this 3-in-1 class is now basically your new wide area class. They don't brandish any weapons, but they would have those daggers laced with sleep, poison, or paralyzed. And they would have larger backpacks than hunters, which now that I mention it, I would make hunters' backpacks significantly smaller. Now hold on, I know that doesn't sound fun, but you've made it this far, so let's keep going. Remember when you hunted Zoromagdaros and the serious handler dropped in with more supplies? Well, instead of camps, your handler would be carrying the team's supplies. So no more multiple camps, no more restocking, but instead you can have a handler join the team that can heal everyone and carry extra supplies. Now, you don't have to have a squad with a handler. Maybe you and your squad are some Monster Hunter veterans or some speedrunning speed demons, and you don't need a handler because you never get hit. This is just the handler aspect of the class. But what about the gather and the shopkeeper part of that class? Like I said, I have always had a special place in my heart for the gathering aspect of the game. And though my wife does play Monster Hunter with me, she too really enjoyed the gathering aspect of the game, and it took some time to get used to hunting. Beating the crap out of monsters isn't for everyone, so I thought, how could I make this game more fun for my wife? She's already the team healer, so how could I make the gathering part a more integral part of the game? Well, I'd make it so people could go out and gather and then open up an online shop selling what they've gathered and combined. And here's where it can get really fun. Maybe some of the materials gatherers need to get are in dangerous places or inhabited by monsters. And so gatherers can enlist the help of hunters to clear out an area or distract the monsters while they round up the materials, and in turn bring those materials back to the hub and sell them for profits. And as their profits increase, they can buy a farm, thus making their online shops even bigger. I think this has the potential to dramatically increase the social aspect of the game. Hunters will develop a rapport with their favorite shopkeeper/handlers. Whew, that was a lot of steak. Do you got room for potatoes with sour cream, chives, and bacon? I knew you would be. It's how I like them. So, if the steak was the mechanics of the game, the potato is the story, with maybe a little more mechanics. But anyway, Monster Hunter's story has pretty much been the same throughout the series. You're the new hunter on the scene that eventually becomes the hero of the village by thwarting off all the aggressive monsters. To some degree, this is mostly what the story has been for the series, and Monster Hunter Rise looks to be no different. I'm kind of tired of this and would like something different, though my version isn't much different. Well, at least when it comes to the aggressive monster part. And for once, I'd like to see a direct sequel to a previous game and a story that has a little more emphasis on the arena. I would make a sequel to Monster Hunter World, and it would go something like this. In the new world in the near future, some hunters get out of hand and start killing for sport. This would lead the commission to remove the rank and title from these bloodthirsty hunters and set and enforce rules of capture only, and only if the monsters encroach in areas too close to Astera or Celiana. And even some monsters were placed on an endangered list and were no longer allowed to be hunted at all. This angered the bloodthirsty hunters. One of them, let's call him Jenner, would lead a bunch of barbarous hunters away and create a new village, its location unknown to the residents of Astera. The commission feared they would lose others to Jenner, and so set it that monsters could only be killed in a monthly event and only in the arena. The monsters killed here would feed and clothe the village, and this is how you would improve the kitchen in the game and earn your layered armor. The arena would also be the only place you could hunt older monsters from older games initially. Only hunters with the highest rank can hunt in the field and hunt older monsters. And so this is where your game begins. You start out hunting in the arena. Initially, it starts as a somewhat civic duty, as your kills feed and clothe the village. Think of it as like, training for the game. But eventually it becomes a competition with you trying to be as good or better than the fast and famous excitable A-lister. For the remainder of the story, we'll call him Justin, although I don't really bring much more after this, but anyway. Justin is beloved by all. He's the speedrunning champion and he owns all the records. So the story follows you as you beat his times and gain more prestige. And as word spreads throughout Astera and Celiana, perhaps maybe, there might be a romantic interest. There's never been a romance in Monster Hunter. Or perhaps children come and, ask you for an autograph or, want a trinket or want to give you a charm or something to that effect. Come to think of it, where are the children in Monster Hunter? Anyway, eventually the veteran field team leader, we'll call him Jonathan, begins to notice your skill and asks if you'd be interested in joining him in the field. Once you accept his offer, this opens up the part of the game where you can now compete with other players throughout the world online for who can be the fastest. The players who own the fastest records get special layered armors that no one else has. Think of them as like Predator dive trails in Apex Legends, or even like WWE title belts. Maybe that would be it, and your character can walk around with a cool belt. But you got to be vigilant. Your title is always up for grabs and you could lose this. So the fastest hunters will want to check in regularly so they don't lose their title and their cool layered armors or belt. But I would also make it so that the record holders could still be able to earn those cool coins that are already in the game that would give them access to buy special layered armors for being the record holder, or many other options. The point would be to make the arena the place where speedrunners can really strut their stuff. Now, back to the story. Once you accept Jonathan's offer, you can join other veteran hunters to go out in the field and capture monsters. But before you can set out on your first field hunt, Jonathan's squad comes back ravaged and without Jonathan. And they report that he was killed in the field by some new aggressive monster. And so you now set out on your first field hunt to investigate what this new aggressive monster is. And while you're out there, a monster on the endangered list accidentally gets killed in the process, and the blame gets placed squarely on you. There would be a court case, and there could be a lot of cool angles or storylines that come out of this. Feel free to add what you want. I didn't really think it all the way through. But eventually the point would be to get you back out on the investigation to prove your innocence and what is causing all these new and old monsters to be so aggressive. Well, remember that bloodthirsty hunter I mentioned earlier? The one that left to start his own village? Jenner. He's a hunting horn main, and he discovered a song that allows him to manipulate and control monsters, and he used it to turn the monsters against Astera and Celiana for having been demoted. So the rest of the game would be you and other hunters chasing him down. Or maybe it's you and other hunters trying to discover the song of legend that would counteract his. I'm not sure. I didn't really think this all the way through. I'm open to ideas. Perhaps maybe it's you trying to bring them back to justice, or maybe you're compassionate and you want to bring them back into the fold. I've always been a fan of choose your own adventure books, so I would be open to some kind of multiple endings. I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that I would like to try something a little bit different with the story. And I know it isn't completely stray from the aggressive point part, but all in all, this is how I would change Monster Hunter. And I'm so full now. And if you've made it this far, I'm pretty sure you are as well. So with a big heart, I would like to say thanks for watching. And for those of you that have subscribed, thanks for subscribing.